Hi everyone, welcome back. We're going to take a look at the sources panel, but the sources panel is really feature rich, and because of that, we're going to split out the content into a few lessons. In this first lesson, we'll take a look at the CSS, and in the next lesson, we'll take a look at the JavaScript. Because we're only focusing on CSS, I've also hidden this right sidebar, which is primarily used for JavaScript. First, I want to show you how we can go from the Elements panel styles pane directly to the sources panel. So here I've got a H1, and it's got a padding of 10 pixels. Let's say I want to find where that's defined, where I can command click on the property or value. So right now I'm holding the command key, and notice how the value is currently highlighted. So if I command click, I get taken straight to where it's highlighted with the cursor in the right position. To also demo source map support, I've actually used a CSS preprocessor here, and in this case it's Sass. You can also use less. And what you'll find is because my CSS file has this little comment at the bottom with a corresponding map file, DevTools is able to map between the two and show me the file that which I actually authored, which is really useful. But what's really nice is going to the exact position in the source code. So for example, my paragraph tag has a color of black. If I command click on the black, I'm actually taken to the variable initialization. Whereas if I command click on the color property, I'm taken to where the color property is actually defined. Let's look at editing code. If I change this 2% into a 20%, well, nothing will happen. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can actually make DevTools understand the mapping between this Sass file and the corresponding CSS file. To do that, we use a feature called workspaces. So I'll right click here and select add a folder to workspace. I've selected the folder I want from the finder, and it's asking me if it can have write access, which is completely understandable since we are going to be gaining save to disk abilities. So I'll select allow, and now it's showing me two versions of the file, which is kind of confusing. I've got like styles.css here and styles.css here. Well, what DevTools has actually done is it's presenting to me the files as they are on the file system, and that's this one. I have a folder called sources panel. Then it's presenting to me the files that are served via the web server. I've actually got a simple Python HTTP server. What we need to do is teach DevTools about the mapping between these two, and in particular I'll choose the CSS file, I'll right click and select map to file system resource. It's already selected the correct file for me based on the file name, I assume. So I'll hit enter, and it's just asking if DevTools can restart. Great, the first thing you'll notice is that localhost 8080 has disappeared. Don't get me wrong, I'm still on that domain, but the point is DevTools is able to hide from view the files coming down the web server. Let's take a look at persist to disk abilities. Say you want to change the color from black to green. I'll come here and I'll change that black into green, hit Command S, and as you see, it changes instantly. And the reason that works is a few things. One, so if I go to settings and auto reload generated CSS, you'll see that's enabled. So what DevTools is doing is it's noticing that the compiled CSS is changing and it's reloading from it without a page refresh, which is very powerful. How is it doing that? Well, if I go to my terminal, you'll see I've actually got gulp running. And gulp can be used with many sort of build systems, and in this case I've got a watch task. But one thing I'd like you to take note is when I changed that color from black to green, this also reflected in my code editor, and this is bidirectional, so I can change that green into a red, Command S, go to Chrome, refresh, and the change is applied immediately. I'm going to change that back to black. I want to show you a few nice features of this editor. This is actually based off the Code Mirror editor, which is open source. I'm going to select this transform variable and hit Command D. By hitting Command D, it selects multiple occurrences of the selections. So I'm going to change that variable to rotate, hit escape, Command S, and that just works. Now if I go to the compiled CSS, which is styles.less, I can see things are just as they should be. By the way, to bring up that dialog box, I used Command P, and what you'll find is we've got a lot of files that we don't really care about, such as in the node modules folder. I want to show you another way that this can bite us. I'm going to close these two and do a project-wide search for the color black, because I know I've defined it somewhere. Do a search, and there is a lot of files which have the word black in them. Of course, my files do match, but I don't particularly care for these node modules files. So what we can do is right click on node modules and select exclude folder. Okay, and just like that, project-wide searches now exclude the folders that you've set to exclude, but also this file open dialog will take my exclusion folders into account. When you have done a project-wide search, you can actually click here and it will take you straight to the line of code where a text match was made. Another cool thing is we can see all the changes that we've been making by right-clicking on the file and selecting local modifications. It will show you the changes that you've been making, and you have the option to revert. or you can just use the Command Z shortcut while in the editor. One nice tip is when editing numerical based values is you can hold the Alt key, so right now I'm holding Alt and I'm going to use up or down. And as you can see, the values increment or decrement by 1 quite nicely. I hit Command S to save and that change is applied immediately. And of course if I go back to Sublime Text, I see that change updated in my editor. So let's take a recap of what we've learned about CSS in the Sources panel. You have full live editabilities, and this isn't limited to just compiled CSS files, but also CSS preprocessor files like Sass or less. If you want to get saved to disk abilities, what you really want to do is create workspaces. I did that originally by right-clicking here and selecting Add Folder to Workspace, but you can also do it another way by clicking on the Settings cog, going to Workspace, and seeing all the folders you've already added to your workspace or adding new ones. If I select this one and go to edit, I can also see the folders I've excluded, so you might find it's useful to exclude things like node modules or Bower components. We saw a few code editing tricks like using Command D to select the next occurrence. You can use Alt and up to increment by 1. And there's a nice integration with the styles pane in the sources panel in the sense that you can always command click a value and get taken straight to that point in your code. If you want an overview for the changes you've been making, you can right click and select local modifications. And to actually really embrace this workflow, you might want to try having a simple gulp file or grunt file, which watches for changes to files and then compiles new versions of them. That's all for now, I'll see you in the next lesson.